Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Michiko Kuroda. I'm a visiting fellow on UN Affairs to the Center of Global Engagement. I'm also a faculty member at the International Relations and Diplomacy Program. Welcome to the International Week that we are organizing. Today is day 1, International Day of Tolerance. Yesterday, on November 16, the world celebrated the International Day of Tolerance in so many countries. Mercy College is celebrating this day in a very special way by and with special persons like all of you. By the way, today's session is being recorded. Now let us begin. I would like to introduce to you today's distinguished co-facilitators, Dr. Eileen Rothschild, Associate Professor at School of Education, and Dr. Renu Varghese, Associate Professor at School of Health and Natural Sciences. Please join me welcoming today's co-facilitators, Dr. Rothschild and Dr. Varghese. You have the floor.
We need the PowerPoint, Michiko.
Can you,
Okay, I will, yeah.
And you need to admit. Next one.
Sorry.
Well, let's do our topic today, inclusivity and empathy. You see, Renu and I are the co-facilitators. And Michiko, can we go back to it, please? The cover?
Oh, sorry, it doesn't work. Do you see it?
No, we see your. And we practiced for hours yesterday, so we should be on our game.
Okay. Do you see it?
Yeah, go back to the first, if you could.
Yes, that one.
Okay, so our title today to celebrate International Day of Tolerance for Renu and I and a panel of 4 incredible people is on the topic of inclusivity, which is important, I think, to everybody on this Zoom call, and empathy, building stronger communication in the college community. And to that end, we have 4 people on the panel who we'll introduce. We'll have a discussion about inclusivity in their classes, and we have 2 short videos to share with you, an opportunity for a question answer reflection. And who are we? Okay, Renu and I, and I'll have Renu introduce herself in a minute, have been partners on and off for many, many years, and we're kind of really happy. If you saw to the right, we began partnering for a lot of faculty development in 2013, and that's us co-teaching then. And we have found each other again this year for a few things, including learning community on service learning. And so it was very nice when Michiko asked us to participate here. I am a full-time professor in education, specifically special ed, long-time background as a teacher, K through 12, mostly a high school teacher, mostly a psychology teacher, and all through the years, professor, starting right out of graduate school, and an adjunct up to 9 years ago, and now here at Mercy full-time, and so glad to do so many very exciting topics like this one. And my partner?
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I am Renu Varghese. I am a faculty from 2006 at Mercy College Nursing Program. Like Eileen said, I had been involved in many learning communities. And I also had the chance to visit few countries because of Fulbright scholarship. I was a Fulbright scholar in 2015 to 2016, and I was able to visit few countries. And also I'm a specialist in aging, so at first hand, I was able to see some of the discrimination towards aging. And right now, I'm a Fulbright specialist for the 3 years, and I'm really very happy to be co-facilitating this topic today and being with you all. Um,
And
next.
our point is that we don't get older, that we look the same or younger, or at least we hope so.
All right, so International Day of Tolerance is celebrated or observed November 16th of every year, and it was created by the UN General Assembly in 1996. The very purpose of this observance of the Day of Tolerance is to educate people about the need for tolerance in our society, and also to help understand the ill effects of intolerance.
And to add a little more, as we researched it, we saw at least two groups use this day for very important matters. And educators, and all of us here are educators, use this day to help students understand the issues of tolerance, human rights, and nonviolence. Human rights activists have also used this day through all these years as an opportunity to speak out on human rights laws, especially with regards to banning and punishing hate crimes and discrimination.
I think it is very apt to read one of the quotes from Ban Ki-moon, who was the Secretary General of UN from 2007 to 2016. On this International Day of Tolerance, I call on all people and governments to actively combat fear, hatred, and extremism with dialogue, understanding, and mutual respect. Let us advance against the forces of division and unite for our shared future. End of quote.
For this purpose today, we took clips or shorter videos on two incredible people who we think have messages to say to us. These are two of the favorite TED Talks presenters that my students have loved within the last year or two. We'd like to show you clips and then think about it as we're introducing our panelists. We also ask you to save any questions to the end. We'll put it in the chat so that all four of our panelists can dig into the questions. We're also asking them to respond to any question they want. It wouldn't be all four of them necessarily answering all questions. The first video.
Can I start?
No, I just want to give 1 second.
Okay.
Yes, her name is Maysoon Zaid, and her extremely funny and provocative TED Talk become very popular. It says, I got 99 problems and palsy is just one. And she has a number of challenges or difference, and she uses great humor to talk about it. So we're going to watch maybe the first 2 or 3 minutes of it. And with both individuals, we hope you watch the whole TED Talk and come away with the messages that I think you will.
I don't want anyone in this room to feel bad for me, because at some point in your life, you have dreamt of being disabled. Come on a journey with me. It's Christmas Eve. You're at the mall. You're driving around in circles looking for parking. And what do you see? 16 empty handicap spaces. And you're like, God, can't I just be a little disabled? Also, I gotta tell you, I got 99 problems and palsy is just one. If there was an oppression Olympics, I would win the gold medal. I'm Palestinian, Muslim, I'm female, I'm disabled, and I live in New Jersey.
And she goes on to talk about it as a comedian for the next 45 minutes. And again, I have built in TED Talks for each of my weeks of classes, and this has been one of the most popular ones in terms of how she gets her messages across.
Okay, we have another video for you. This is Dr. Brown, who is the professor of psychology. He's a motivational speaker and he's an educator. He uses multiple ways to include inclusivity in the classroom and also teach about the topic to many educators around the world. There are two videos here. The one is a short version, and there is another full-length video. We want you to please, when you get a time, watch that because it is 38 minutes long. So we have selected the shorter version. It's only for a few minutes, and watch with us.
With summer coming to an end, teachers and staff at Hatboro-Horsham School District are gearing up for another school year. District staff members attended a special presentation where the table was turned and they were the students.
And right now, you're in my classroom.
The class today was on understanding neuroscience and the neuroscience behind perception, how we see things, what influences what we see. And I started at what we see because that's important before what we teach.
The morning was filled with laughter and fun, but also focusing on how every student deserves a good education.
I am Dr. Adolph Brown. Don't judge a book by its cover.
I came in the way I looked as a student. So that was basically a young man who was grieving, a young man who was not a thug, but a young man who dressed in such a way that he wanted to push people away because all of his prior relationships were letdowns and disappointments.
Dr. Brown shared his own personal story and teaching our staff that we all have backpacks.
I mean, so many of us are carrying so much that we're not in the present because our past is weighing us down.
We all have baggage, and you never know what somebody else is going through, what they're carrying. So it's good to be kind to people and understand where they're coming from instead of judging them.
Many lessons were taken away from the day, and staff members were very impressed.
It was the most motivational opening day that I've experienced in the last 30 years here at Hatboro-Horsham. It was remarkable.
With such an uplifting and motivational day, HH is ready to start the new school year. For HH TV, I'm Amanda Treble.
As you see, it was an eye-opener for all the educators there. There is a full-length version. When you get a chance, please, view it, the full-length version video.
That's right.
Can you go to the next slide, please?
We have tried to get him as a guest here for Faculty Seminar Day, but he's very booked up. About 2 years ago, Teaching and Learning Committee saw this video, saw him like take off the heavy clothes and how people's perceptions changed. And he was really very motivating. One of the large groups he went to where I saw this was NEA, National Education Association, talking to thousands of teachers. And for today's discussion, we brought in 4 of your colleagues. And when I say we brought in, they were recommended by their deans, each of them, for having stories or voices that they thought would be valuable for our panel. And I'm going to introduce my colleague, Professor Susan Gaskin-Noel. You'll have time for her to be introduced by herself, respond to some questions. She is the go-to person in our Dobbs Ferry when we were there, library, and just the person you want on every committee, including the Senate. So welcome, Susan. Second person.
Our next panelist is Professor Victor Peden-Kamani. He's the Associate Dean of School of Business. We welcome you, Victor. It is our pleasure to have you as a panelist.
Our third panelist is our esteemed colleague, Dr. Jack Simons, assistant professor, been with us a few years, and I've had the pleasure of teaming and co-facilitating many projects with him, and he's just outstanding. He's in the School of Social and Behavioral Sciences, professor in the counseling program, and he will introduce himself in a few minutes.
The final panelist, the last one, but of course not the least, Dr. Jude Agua. He's the professor, School of Liberal Arts. Thank you, Dr. Jude, for agreeing to be the panelist for this session. And as you know, Dr. Jude comes with a lot of international experience, and he's going to share that experiences with us today. Thank you all the panelists. So we will start with our questions after you introduce yourself.
Okay, this one we would like all four panelists to anchor us, tell us a little bit about what brought you here to Mercy. We have a few questions, and then the rest of the questions, though, as I said, are up to you. That we have 6 questions that you may want to come into, and then open it up to the rest of the audience. So in your introductory round, tell us who you are, your present position. What was your career path? What brought you to Mercy? How do you identify yourself? And what is your experience on this topic? Okay, knowing it's the Day of Tolerance. So why don't we start with Susan?
You're muting.
That will help,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
I'm currently an assistant professor in libraries. I am coming up on my 21st year here at Mercy. Mercy was my first professional job, actually, right out of graduate school. And it was, being a librarian was never a plan. A professional plan. I just happened to be working at a library while I was in school, and was strongly encouraged by my colleagues there at the time, the librarians there. They thought I would make a great librarian. So I listened, went to graduate school, Pratt, and here I am, almost 21 years later. I actually started at Mercy that January, even before I had my physical diploma in my hands, and I have not regretted that one bit. How do I identify myself? I'm not sure how to respond to that. I migrated from Trinidad and Tobago as an adult. I just thought, I needed to do something to better myself. And I was hoping that, that would also help my children. At that time, I had, one son. I now have 2 kids. And I just thought, migrating to the US was a good move for me, and I have not regretted that also. So I'm not sure how I identify myself. I am a woman, I'm a mom, I'm a professional. I'm not sure what else to say on that realm. What is your experience with this topic? I think everyone has some sort of experience with this topic, and the level at which you have that experience differs, but everyone has some sort of experience with tolerance and discrimination and prejudice. And I have, over the years, I've just taken this in stride, and when we started share, you might hear some of that. But I do not let intolerance or discrimination or prejudice affect the way that I live, that I treat people, that I allow people to treat me, how I raise my kids, my grandchildren. I just don't, it's not in the forefront of how I live my daily life. And I think that has helped me to be the person that I am.
Thank you, Susan. Beautiful beginning. Jack, you want to come in?
I think it was me. I think it was Susie.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, Jack. I want to interrupt you.
Oh, no, we have a panel first.
Right.
Thank you. I'm currently an assistant professor of school counseling in the Department of Counseling in the School of Social and Behavioral Sciences. I'm in my 5th year at Mercy College, and we teach, as perhaps some of you know, both clinical mental health and school counselors. So I have a background also in clinical mental health training, and that's part of the plan. I was able to specialize in a couple of areas in counseling, and it brought me to Mercy because we train both types of students. I didn't necessarily think I'd become a counselor initially in my life. I did investment research and did some marketing stuff and things like that. But I always knew I wanted to be I'm a helper, and helping professions have been something in my family for a long time. And I thought that that's where I'd be most happy. So I ended up retraining and became a counselor. Then I was a school counselor in middle schools and high schools in St. Louis, Missouri. I was also in Tucson, Arizona, working out there. I spent a year in a spinal cord injury unit in Milwaukee. At that point in my career, wasn't real comfortable working around issues of disability. And after that year, we developed a great deal of confidence to do that. And then I ended up pursuing my PhD in counseling. And then I learned about Mercy in the process of graduating and seeing what Mercy had to offer. What strikes me the best, or what strikes me the most with our community, is just our commitment to teaching what we do to the next generation of students, to give them voices that historically that many of them have not had, which is also related to my identity as a gay man. Much of my research is around LGBT and gender issues, as well as equality for females. And that's a thread that pervades a lot of the work that I do. And we're working on stuff like that in the counseling department with our students who are interested in these types of issues and how they also intersect with other minoritized statuses, such as race, ethnicity, and so on and so forth. My experience in the topic of tolerance has been widespread. I've also had a passion for studying issues around cultural intelligence and linguistic intelligence, and how we interact with all types of different people, and how we do that effectively so that we have our voices heard, or we're able to give other people's voices more attention. So my specific focus around gender and sexuality in schools has been much broader around topics related to other things as well. So that's a little bit about myself. I think I took a lot of time there, so I don't want to eat up too much time. I look forward to the rest of our discussion today.
Thank you, Jack. Victor?
Hi, everybody. So in my present position, I'm an assistant professor and also I serve as the associate dean of the School of Business. I've been with Mercy for 5 years, and what brought me to Mercy, I say I'm an accidental teacher. I really was not planning to be a teacher. It was a transition that happened around 2014 when I was winding down an entrepreneurial venture that I was working on. I've been working on for the past 3 years, and it was all about in the finance industry. I was actually raising money, a lot of money, to invest in Africa, and it just happened that I couldn't close the deal, and then I was looking for the next career move, and I bumped into Ray Manganelli in a cafe, and he told me, hey, why don't you teach? Do you want to teach in a class? And then I said, okay, let me try it. And then I started as an adjunct at Mercy, and then I was asked to move in as a full-time, and here I am. And prior to that, like I said, I was in investment, and prior to that, I worked in the airline industry where I was planning and forecasting flights. I worked for Delta Airlines for about 6 years, and so that was really my quite a good cultural learning of American society. based in Atlanta, and which is really a segue to my identity, where I feel I am more of a global citizen. I don't know where to pinpoint where I am anymore, because obviously today now I'm an American. I'm more and more every day becoming more Americanized than anywhere else. I was born and raised in Africa, in Cameroon, and I left Cameroon as a quite a young adult, and then I lived in France for 10 years, where the first part of my education was completed, and then I moved here about 20, I would say 22 years ago. So yeah, my identity, it's really very, very mixed, maybe more like a mutt, and which really kind of it's all about the different experience that I've had on the topic, even starting very, very young in studying Cameroon, because I was raised in a very multicultural environment, where I went to a French private school where I was the only Black kid in the classroom, and even in my own country of origin. And believe me, there I already saw from the beginning that there were definitely differences early on. Differences in colors, differences on how the faculty were treating different people. And then at home, when I went back home, I was in a Cameroonian cultural environment where I was expected to behave as an African. There were some cultural expectations that I had. So that multicultural environment, I think, kind of maybe prepare me to these different experiences. So I guess that's that's a lot of experiences around this topic.
Okay, thank you, Victor. And again, there'll be time for everybody to come in on the questions. So Jude, you finish up, if you would, the introduction question, please.
Yes. I am originally from Nigeria, and those of you that know Nigeria very well, it is a country made up of over 250 ethnic groups. And I tell you that to live and survive there, you have to operate within a concept of tolerance, and because that's the only way you can actually deal with the diversity of the place. And I am.
Excuse me, Jude, can everybody mute themselves because they're dinging? I don't know if that's coming in from you, Machiko, letting people in.
It's because when people come in.
Yeah, there was also actually some people are doing some work up in the house roof. I think that's.
If there's that, we don't hear that, Jude, but we hear a lot of the beeping in.
Okay.
Because people are coming in.
Is there a way to mute that when they come in?
You have to go all over and back, and I don't think the settings have to be changed.
Keep going.
Yeah, I am presently the professor at School of Liberal Arts, Department of Humanities, and mostly I teach courses in religion. I would say I'm the religion specialist. Teach world religions, and also teach monotheistic religions and other courses also in religion. And I have been doing this now for about 20 years at Mercy College. And prior to that, as I said, from Nigeria, I did my postgraduate studies in my undergraduate studies in Nigeria and my postgraduate studies in Italy. I lived some time in Germany to do the language course, and also and also did attend summer schools in Hungary, Budapest, on multiculturalism, and here I am in the last 20-something years now at Mercy College and in the United States. And prior to that, also, I taught in Nigerian University for 6 years before coming to America. Besides, my special area is theological anthropology, where I deal with, pay attention to the various religions and cultures of the world, and everything that goes very much around it. I identify myself first of all as a world citizen. That's where I think what I think I am now. Also as a religious specialist of the Catholic tradition. Not just conservative, no, but pretty much liberal in my thinking and in the way I do that. So I'm a very highly spiritual person, and teaching religion, and also being in touch with the spiritualities of many religions has also been part of my background. My experience with regard to this topic and of diversity and inclusivism comes very much central to what I've been doing at Mercy College. For teaching world religions means you got to know those religions. And again, a few years ago, I had to attend a seminar that was organized by the National Youth Corps, Interfaith Youth Corps, along with the Pluralism Department of Harvard University. And after that, I was able to come to Mercy College. Actually, my honors religion class is it's very much is titled Interfaith Dialogue or Religious Dialogue, and that has actually brought me to consider in a very, very deep way what tolerance means, what inclusivity means, what diversity means, the very meaning of it. I have been able to take my students to various religious places in the country, across them mosques, Jewish synagogues, and Buddhist monasteries, and to have that experience with them. So I expound the concept of really tolerance, especially in the context of religion, which may be a little bit different from the idea of tolerance as public and civic virtue. So I would like to a little bit stop right there now. So I hope that gives you a little bit of some bone to work with.
Thank you, Jude.
Yeah.
It's your turn.
Yeah.
So thank you all panelists. It's really nice to have all of you with varied experiences nationally and internationally. So we are going to ask you a few questions. We have 6 questions in total. It's up to all of you to either answer. It's up to you not to answer. So the first question to share your experiences is on who is the person who has made you most aware of the subject of prejudice or intolerance or discrimination. I would like to start with Susan. Susan, if you could please answer that. Susan, are you here? All right, so Susan can join. Whoever wants to answer.
I'm right here. I'm sorry. I was mute. I'm so sorry. Yes, thank you, Renu. it might surprise you that the person that has made me most aware of prejudice and intolerance and discrimination is actually a colleague. And it had to do with some of the experiences I was having in academia. And because this colleague is, you know, an African-American, and it is, I guess, most aware of topics more so than I am, being an implant from the Caribbean. Sometimes I would be a little unaware of behaviors. And so, over the years, having discussions with this particular colleague, it was brought to my attention that certain behaviors, even though it might not be apparent to me as someone who has not experienced this, all my life, it was eye-opening when certain behaviors was explained to me that these are subtle indiscriminations and behaviors of prejudice and intolerance, and so over the years I have learned to recognize this behavior and actually sometimes address it. So even though one might think that the person who might make you most aware of this is some leader or somebody who was actually somebody very personal to me and would help me understand and sort of bridge that gap between not being a person who was born in this country and sort of raised with the understanding of these topics in a way that others might. This person really helped me to understand and become more aware of it when it is happening, to recognize it, because sometimes I just wouldn't.
Thank you, Susan. So it was a colleague who made you aware of the subject. Anybody else from the panelists, would you like to share your experience? Victor, Jack, or Jude?
I would say it was my, I think, 4th or 5th grade teacher. I was obviously in a French school, and then she would give a hug to all the white kids, and she would not hug me. So so that was, I understood that, yeah, there was difference. I could put 1 and 1 together. I mean, 2 and 2 together, and the only difference between me and the other kids was just like, I was black. But the thing is that I was able to overcome this type of prejudice early on, because at home I had the safe environment that I have.
Thank you so much for sharing that experience with us. I would also like to ask Dr. Simons or Dr. Agua, would you like to share?
Happy to share. Mine's not as clear cut. That's perhaps why I didn't jump out right up front, but perhaps like some of us, when I was just a child growing up, I never could understand inequality, not being part of the mainstream and knowing that very, very young, that I wasn't part of the majority. So inequality resonated with me. And then as I progressed through life, I think when I went to St. Louis University, I had a Jesuit education. That's when I began to see more of a commitment to helping other people based on inequality and disparities. And then I had, this ties into what Susan had said, I had a colleague, a former clinical mentor, who went to the College of Holy Cross. He lived in Tucson. It's interesting. Before I moved to New York City, the greatest numbers of New Yorkers I met were in Tucson, Arizona, living out there, and this was one of them. His name was Michael Hutchins, and he was a founder of the National Organization of Counselors for Social Justice. And through 2 years of clinical training with him, talking about systemic oppression in the context of schools and counseling, and learning about his perception of, growing up during an era that I didn't grow up in. Some of you grew up during the civil rights marches and Stonewall. You were actually there, you were watching the news. I had to learn about it along the way afterwards. So that's a little bit of my story around figuring it out and realizing that something was wrong. And there were people who were either contributing to it or trying to fix it, you know, so.
Thank you, Dr. Simmons. That was beautiful. Dr. Jude, would you like to add on anything to
Well, oh yeah, what I would like to say is that I haven't really had like a traumatic, you know, sort of experience, but as you make your way through life, go through, as I said, go from one country to another, from one place to the other, because of differences in language or accent or whatever it is, you are bound to experience, one form of prejudice or the other. And cumulatively, all these experiences can actually contribute in really deepening your understanding of this very subject, but not, But if I may jump to a recent time where I met somebody I thought was a good friend, but for political reasons, and then they developed a lot of intolerance, and when I would speak publicly on some subject, and this individual would walk away, stand up and walk out, and did it a few times, and eventually I did confront him on this, and and then I saw the depth of the prejudice he had in himself with regard, not particularly to me, but to people of other races. And it only became evident because I was representing the interest of either the minority or the group that this individual did not, So my encounter with this person, whose name I'm not gonna mention, actually helped me to understand how deep-seated intolerance and discrimination could actually be.
Thank you so much. We have 5 more questions. Hopefully we will get to all of them. So it seems like either a colleague or an educator, someone who you work closely with are the ones who made you aware of that. So it tells you that educators need more exposure to the topic. So my second question also is to all panelists. You may choose to answer, all of you, or you may wish not to answer. So the question is, what book or movie or incident affected you the most about the topic of intolerance? Again, I would start with Susan. Susan, you are muted, please. Susan, we can hear you.
I'm so sorry. I keep forgetting to unmute myself. I'm sorry. The book that comes to mind is the most recent book that I read this past summer, actually, by Trevor Noah. And it's called Born a Crime. It was so good. But what stood out to me in that book most of all, I mean, Trevor is, if you guys have heard him or read his stuff, you know how funny he is. So he can tell a really serious story, but with so much love and humor and that kind of stuff. But what stood out to me most was that, this young man was unable to spend any time with his dad, who was white, just because of where they lived and the intolerance in that country. And so that book affected me a great deal, because I thought, no one should be deprived of the ability to spend time with your dad just because, of racial differences. And so that sort of affected me greatly. Like I said, that's the most recent book that I read, so it comes to mind.
Thank you.
Movie.
Yes. Go ahead.
Oh,
Go ahead.
sorry. Oh, it is a book or
No, I
movie.
just
Okay.
wanting to ask whether you could put that name in the chat so that people can read.
Okay, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I agree with Susan. It's a
Do you have a
beautiful.
movie?
No,
I'm
Do
sorry.
you have a movie that affected you?
I did have a movie, but I thought I would yield to someone
Yeah.
else because
Sure.
of.
Okay.
But,
All right.
but
So
really
if you
quickly,
can put,
and you guys probably have seen this too. It's When They See Us, again, a really recent movie.
Yes.
That one really affected me.
so would you please put it in the chat for the
I will.
audience so that
I'll
it
do
will
that
get
right
there?
now.
Thank you so much. So whoever is willing to answer this question, please jump in.
Can jump in. Definitely Roots. I don't know if you remember the miniseries Roots.
Yes.
Yeah, I watched that growing up, and that was, I think, my first exposure to the stories of slavery.
Okay, thank you so much. So we can go to the next question, Eileen, if you would like.
Can I say something?
Yes, Jude.
To the other one. To the second question is it's not really about a book that taught me about intolerance, but rather the readings that have actually helped to explain the importance of tolerance and all that, and X-ray what would be the negatives, which would be intolerance and discrimination and prejudice. I think one of the readings that have actually inspired me was it was a sermon, a sermon delivered by Martin Luther King Jr. And this was his sermon on Gandhi. This was in 1959 when he gave this sermon on Mohandas K. Gandhi. And part of that sermon, the prayer that concluded it was where Martin Luther King Jr. referred to God. He said, God, we call you different names. Some call you Allah. Some call you Elohim, some call you Jehovah, and some call you Brahma, and so on and so forth. Was a very important theme in dialogue and interfaith religion. Another book also of recent times, even before then, I would mention, some of you may know about Thich Nhat Hanh, who wrote the book Living Buddha, Living Christ. It's also a very important book in tolerance and all that. But recently, the book Caste, The Origins of Our Discontent, written by Isabel Wilkerson, is also another book that is very, very analytic of what is the foundation of discrimination and prejudice.
Okay,
All right.
we want to thank you all, and I think we're just going to ask for 2 responses for the next few questions so we get a variety. And if you would put those 2 references down, Martin Luther King's and Isabel's book. And we did start a book club yesterday that some of you are involved in. I know Victor and I, on diversity. So we're looking for shorter or longer readings, and maybe we will all read that Martin Luther King Jr. Sermon. Okay, so 3 now brings it a little home to you for you as a professor. And again, maybe just 2 of you respond here. What do you think you do in your class that promotes inclusivity? Are there special guests, films, videos? You saw 2 of the TED Talks earlier today that you see I build in special ed classes. So what do you think, if you could share one thing with us that promotes this better understanding?
I can share.
Yes, Jack.
I really try to, well, from day one, when students come in, I value their opinions. I ask them to review things with me, how I put the course together, but I definitely let them know that they're in a position of power and they should question question what I put together. If they think a particular assignment is not an assignment they would like to do to demonstrate they've learned something in the class, then I'd like for them to tell me. So that plays into something, as we know, as a collaborative approach. I also have a personalized approach. You know, we talk about music and movies. You know, at the beginning of classes, I try to use music or movies that creates a mood or ties into what we're going to learn, or ties into a personal experience about my own life related to my own development in the context of the class and things like that. I realize that I don't look like every student, nor do I learn like every student that we have at Mercy. So there are ways I've learned, and I write about this and study it, to bridge that gap. And I find that the professors that are willing to open up a little bit more will find that they usually reap the rewards more than they would perhaps realize, especially if they fear maybe sharing a little bit too much. I'm not talking about sharing everything in the kitchen sink with our students, but I'm talking about selectively at appropriate times, sharing things that help them connect more with you as the professor and the material that you're teaching. So those were some thoughts that I've had.
Thank you, Jack. Would one more panelist want to come in on that? Again, we might have time at the end when we open it up.
I can add if you want.
Yes, Victor.
In my class, at the beginning of class, I have a survey. I ask a student to send me to answer 5 specific questions, including where they were born and where they are from, what they enjoy doing. And I use those questions to create groups. In all my classes, they are teamwork. And I use those demographic information to organize very well diverse teams. So that's really my approach in that first introduction, to talk about themselves, where they are coming from. I first introduce myself and tell them about my background, and then encourage them to really be proud of their origin and to explain where they are from. I always joking that you know, I also enjoy eating plantains. So just to make them comfortable.
Thank you, Victor. Let's go to the 4th question. Again, we can cycle back when we open it up.
Next slide.
Okay, so we've talked a lot in many the venues we go to about implicit bias, which is, can we go to 4, Michiko? And if you again could look at your class or look at you as the leader of the class, what implicit or explicit messages might be given in our classes about diverse learners? You know, you heard from Victor that, and Jack, about how they get to know their students from the beginning, that that kind of connectedness some of us didn't feel in the beginning of classes, or might not ever. So what do you think, answering this, if you want, implicit or explicit messages might be given in our classes of diverse learners?
I'm happy to share.
Okay, Jen.
It's funny that this is one of the slides, because I have a paper under review right now in which we interviewed a good number of individuals who identify as part of the sexual minority community, and we interviewed these individuals over 3 cohorts, meaning they had to grow up during the Stonewall Civil Rights era, or they grew up during the HIV/AIDS generation, or they grew up and came of age during the passage of same-sex marriage and inclusion in the military. And interviewing them about their retrospective school experiences, they gave us all this data, which we coded, and we identified particular messages. Either they were implicit or explicit. And the two areas around issues tied to gender and sexuality that came up for them in the classroom were usually related to academics or personal issues. So we've learned that if there's stuff going on with students that's personal and you're uncomfortable with it as an educator, if they're a sexual minority student or a gender minority student, you might be at a disadvantage in meeting their needs and might be vulnerable to having implicit bias, or in rarer instances, your explicit bias might come out. I'd be hopeful that we wouldn't be rogue, meaning we wouldn't explicitly impose values that were in total contradiction to values that young adults were trying to figure out, or they were actually different than ours as educators. So this ties into this area of expertise that I have. Victor talked about his activity, and it's interesting, I do something similar as well to try to connect, to build that bridge at the beginning of the semester. And one of the questions that's on that piece of paper, that pulse, I call it the pulse check at the beginning of the semester, is where have you traveled to? And I have found that teaching students in New York City and greater New York, many of them have traveled to a lot of places, but every once in a while, there are a few students who haven't traveled beyond their borough. And because of that, I can see differences between them and their peers who've had the opportunities to travel far and away. So I can watch them more closely and maybe be more explicit in supportive ways and not hostile ways to bring them on board, you know. So sadly, from what I've seen, and maybe some of you on the call today have more expertise or knowledge, but studying the implicit and explicit interactions between educators and students in the classroom or in school settings, there's very limited research, and it needs to be studied much more. So I'm grateful that you've asked this question. Thank you.
Okay. Renu?
Next slide, Michiko. Thank you, Jack. So my next question, I know partly it's been answered by Victor and also Jack, but as educators, I know that some of the strategies worked, some did not work. So you might have things to share on that. So I would ask either Jude or Susan to suggest and recommend, what are the strategies that you would recommend to make the stronger communication for inclusivity in classes for students? Or anybody can come in if Jude or don't have anything to say.
Well, there are, I know so many things that people do, and in any of them, sometimes it is almost like very difficult to place value with regard to effectiveness, but I do know that, for instance, my honors religion class this semester, the topic is Jesus and Buddha. And the class is actually divided. I have students who are Christians and Muslims, and I have also a Buddhist. And rather than actually have them do separate term papers, I'm trying to get all of them together to work on a poster project where they will deal with different aspects, but work together as a team and work together on a project. I thought that would be a way actually to encourage, this concept of tolerance and also communication with regard to inclusivity. I think the other things that other pedagogical steps that people take, and whether it is that they bring speakers to their class or who would speak, that works sometimes, and the idea too of what also I do, I take students to go to either a mosque or go to a synagogue or go to a monastery, Buddhist monastery. That these are things that I think faculty who can do it absolutely will, in those ways, bring to the forefront the values that are connected with diversity. And I think along these lines, these are steps that can actually be helpful.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. Next slide, Michiko.
I'm going to raise the sixth question. I just want to thank Jude, because Jude, I'm an advisor for Education Club for our students, undergrad and grad here, who are teachers or teacher candidates, future teachers. And we have our next Education Club on this topic. It's in December, and it has to do with teachers becoming more aware of different religions and holiday traditions, and trying to make that as inclusive and understanding a situation. So we're going to have an open panel and discussion about it. So I'd like to reach out to you for some of your experiences. Final question that we're going to ask you, everybody here today, to ask the panelists or give their feelings about it. And then we need about 5 minutes at the end to end it. So Michiko, if you would go back, please. Okay, so this is really a perspective here. And our sixth and final question, looking over the span of your lifetime, how do you perceive the future of education with respect to tolerance, empathy, and equity in the college community? And we weighed about this. We didn't want to become politically involved, so we chose our words very carefully, but kind of where do you think we're going? Are we going in a good direction? Or as a college community, we do have a lot of power, hopefully, to get into students' lives and not be the teachers that some of you, like Victor said, that he wasn't hugged, and that's very powerful message there. So let us be the ones that the students come to, can talk to, and I think everybody here would probably be very comfortable with that. So who would like to come in on this?
I would. Here at Mercy, I have seen, and like I said, I've been here almost 21 years, and I am almost always impressed when I walk around campus and I see the interaction between the students. I am not talking so much about the faculty side, but tolerance, empathy, and equity among the students at Mercy, it is awesome. And I am always moved by it, the way they interact with each other. All the different ethnic groups, religious persuasions, whatever it might be. I just love the dynamic between students at Mercy. And we know that there are so many different groups at Mercy, and yet you see them interacting in such a great way. I think it's beautiful. I think there is work to be done on the faculty side, but I think the students are doing really well and in the right direction.
And that's wonderful. And Jack?
Yeah, well, I'm hopeful that as we get more away from the white hegemonic model, that we're going to see much more, feminist-based communal stuff, where like all teachers, including even those in the life sciences and hard sciences, will embrace maybe again more of the collaborative approach, and making sure that quiet student who doesn't talk much is asked why, what's going on there. If it's a personal issue, try to explore it to some degree. If it's something about the class, don't take it personal and be offended. be willing as an educator to be told that what you're doing doesn't work. I'm just hopeful that we'll see more of that type of stuff going into the future, that the next generations of educators will be more like that. It'll be like we're all in this together kind of thing versus like we have the knowledge, we're giving it to you because you're lucky, you know, that kind of thing. That's a hopeful vision of the future. And I actually see some things that are occurring at Mercy and other places that confirm that it's happening. So I would say that's how I'm wanting to see things, and I think I'm seeing it. I'm looking for what I want to look for, though. So that's usually how I look for what I look for. So
Thank you.
You're
So
welcome.
Open it up, Renu. You wanted the next.
So I would like to thank all the panelists first for identifying yourself as an expert in this field, and second, sharing your experience and being very explicit about what discrimination or intolerance means to you and your experiences from way past, and also sharing some of the strategies that you use in classrooms that other educators can really follow, and to help our common goal, that's to help our students feel comfortable in the classroom. So I thank all the audience participants in this here in this Zoom link. Now the floor is open to you. We would like to hear from you, and please ask questions, anything that you want to share with the panelists and the rest of us. So we have two questions for you to answer. Number one, what message have you learned today from this panelist? Number two, in what ways can you promote tolerance in our school or in the college community? These are the two questions. Anybody can answer. You need to unmute yourself and please respond to these questions. Please go ahead. Anyone can answer? Or if you would like to ask the panelists any questions.
Can we?
Hey, I'd like to.
Can we comment too? I mean, we're panelists. Can we also speak to this? Can we also speak to these questions? I mean answer.
I'd like to make a comment. In today's learning environment for our students, and it was even evident here at this program, if you look through the participants, today's students tend to keep their screens blank. And in a class that I'm teaching, it's an asynchronous class, so I only have office hours. And I talk to students about why do they keep their screens blank? They do not have the opportunity to meet each other when they are doing that. So based on your topic today, I think some students don't feel comfortable with other students in a large environment. And perhaps some of the things we can do, I have even during office hours broken them up into small groups, requiring them to open their screens, and surprisingly they did. So this topic that you're talking about, where how do we make all students feel comfortable in the environment that we are creating for them? So it's not only the intolerance in the community or in the environment, but I think so many students today don't have that feeling of comfort among each other in the classroom environment. And it's not, I'm not saying it's not, the professor's fault, it's the students and their community. So how do we make that better, especially now when so many students are participating in online learning?
Renu, you are muted.
Sorry, my phone was ringing, so I had to mute it. So thank you, Sheila. Anyone in the panelists can answer or respond to that question?
I mean, I think today's environment, it's has laid bare the disparities, right? And how the students who have less resources are struggling. And it's going to be very, very difficult to, in my opinion, from such a platform to come up with a clear policy, at least at the college level, outside of what we are already doing. In have a policy to address maybe this discomfort. I think, in my opinion, we just, as faculty, we just have to have an open mind of the issue and try to the best of our ability to accommodate and encourage students to engage with each other. Maybe, you know, small groups session the way you are describing. I mean, learning from you know, best practices. We are all new in this environment. I think as faculty, I'm learning on what others are doing, you know, to create smaller group engagement and organizing students in teams, in groups. I think we have to push, right? We have to push for students to do that. I think yes, we have to learn, and I'm learning. I'm learning from the experiences, like with Jack. What Jack is doing is in his class. Maybe I'm going to practice that in my class.
Thank you, Victor. I also want to remind you, especially Jack, you have some chats on the chat box commenting you on your strategies and your ways that you include students. So please read that. So
Yeah.
then anybody else from the audience?
Yes. Okay. All right.
Anybody else from the audience want to ask questions to panelists or to respond or to make statements, share anything?
Okay, we're going to continue, but again, you know, towards the end, just make sure everybody has time to say goodbye to all of us, and what pearls of wisdom might you share?
Right. Are we good with the time, Michiko?
We have about 15 more minutes, so I think we're going to wind down.
All right, great.
Michiko?
So if you have any other questions.
Can you see the next slide? Okay, so as we were talking the last few weeks, Renu, Michiko and I, we were saying that there's not one answer to fighting intolerance or being the most inclusive person, that you need it. And I do know a lot about disability rights. So I guess I would have the same list here, that we have to counter the intolerance we see, we read, we experience in many, many ways. And I'd say one part would be the law, that again, we wouldn't have the special ed mechanism right now if we didn't have decades of laws coming out and saying that. We also, and I think we're all dedicated to it, we know education has to be going with that in terms of appreciating people, understanding it, respecting it. That's why I'm looking forward to this new education club on holidays and traditions, and just the understanding of people who might have very different backgrounds. The third one, the access or accessibility. And I think we do pretty well here. Are we making sure that everybody, through the Office of Accessibility, through PAC, through all the student services, getting the information that they need? And again, Susan knows that in terms of our incredible library here. The next one is my favorite one, is the awareness and sensitivity of what are the things, like those two short videos, and maybe we can end with your feelings about that. Is the awareness, the attitude, probably to me is the key of what's going on. The book club yesterday, The White Fragility is the book, and that was a challenge to a lot of people, including me, in terms of are we as aware of our own feelings and being the best model we can be for others? And again, working with teacher candidates, I'm very aware of that. And the last one, what are the solutions locally, nationally, globally that we can do? And we're going to end with a quote, and then maybe the last round, see what people thought of those movies.
Yeah, the last slide. And
okay, and You had said the Martin Luther King writing, so where our last shout out is to share some of his beautiful words on social justice as we say goodbye to this topic in a few minutes. And he says here in his book, Strength to Love, and you know, he was activist and civil rights leader, returning hate for hate multiplies hate, adding deeper darkness to a night already devoid of stars. Darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. So the last round and maybe your goodbye, why do you think Renu and I chose those two videos, Mason Saeed and Dr. Adolph Brown, and what is your goodbye message to us? And Victor, why don't you start?
I mean, I would say having an open mind, just spend a lot of time listening first. Listen and have an open mind about what others represent. I would say, you know, the racists that I encounter, I don't let him affect me. If he doesn't want to engage, I leave him alone. But if I have an opportunity to engage with him, I tend to show my good side and show that, you know, I'm just I'm not a threat to him. And I think it's all about who you are. It's all about you as a person, as a human being, and how you are expected to treat others and treat others with respect and dignity. We have a limited amount of time in our life to do things and to take care of our family, to take care of our friends. And we are not going to ultimately change the world, but we can make a difference in the small community that we have by behaving as you know, as the decent human beings, and because we are role model people, maybe not this generation, but the generation coming after us, and particularly the students that we are teaching, when they see our behavior, we you know, I think we influence them in that regard.
Thank you, Victor.
Thank you.
Susan?
I am just going to reiterate something that Victor said, and that is treat others the way you want to be treated. My mom taught me that. I have taught that to my kids, and I really and truly try to live that. And I think it makes such a difference to your life. If you treat people the way you want to be treated, the way that you think people should be treated, I think it's going to make a huge difference in the world.
Jude?
Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Jude?
He's on his iPad.
Yes, Dr. Jude, I think he's getting on.
Jude, you want to say goodbye to us?
All right, so I think he's,
Mhm.
you want to give him time, or I think he's gone.
Jack, get ready.
Well, to piggyback off what's been said, it's great to think about treating people the way you want to be treated, but what if you're thinking about not wanting to treat them nice because you don't agree with them? And it had me, the reason I share that is because I was recently thinking about how we're so, how you can cut the tension in the country, you know, with a knife, with everything that's been going on. And it really had me reflect over advocacy skill development. Part of my story early on that I didn't share was developing advocacy skills over time, working through anger, working through frustration about, you know, marginalization, being treated differently. And that's a process for any minoritized person, or any person who's treated differently when they think they should be treated another way. So there's a process taking place So I went online and I was just trying to find some quotes that sort of reminded me of the importance of trying to meet even your biggest foes halfway in peaceful places. And I found a really great one, I thought, by Sonia Sotomayor from the Supreme Court. And she wrote, or she said, the Supreme Court is a prime example for the nation of how you can disagree agreeably. That's a hard thing to do, to listen to people who are fundamentally different than you and to really go head to head with them on an issue. We all have some basic values, however, that cut across cultures, genders, parties, religion, everything. You have to look at the good in people. So to always make sure that I'm able to find a way to build a bridge with someone, a student, a colleague, or whatnot, let's talk about stuff that really we're excited about together, and then we'll talk about the stuff that maybe we don't get along about. You know, another part of the story for me was just having a very diverse family. You know, a father from what's now Pakistan, a family from the Czech Republic, and other parts of the world. And by having grown up in this diverse family, I've been able to sit back and watch and see how to interact with diversity in a respectful way versus just shutting down and you know, isolating yourself from other people and fighting and whatnot, because diversity brings tension, but it also can bring a lot of social support. And I think that's what's really cool about it. You know, so thank you for including me today.
Thank you, Jack. Jude, you have the last word.
I don't think he's connected.
My internet went down, and yes, I'm happy to reconnect with you. Yes, I want to thank I want to thank the organizers of this you know, panel, and thank you very much, Eileen and Renu, for what you've done. And because what the International Day of Tolerance, the whole project has the fundamental question that keeps coming all the time, is how will you practice tolerance today? How will you as an individual practice tolerance? And then that tolerance is not only an ideal, no, but also it is practice and it is lived experience. And I think the suggestion Victor and Jack have made that engagement is a key solution to actually promoting tolerance. Because what happens is, when I come from the background of a church, of religion, where each religion may be very dogmatic and they claim to have the totality of the truth, and they are not yielding to the truth and the values of other religions, it becomes really very, very difficult to look at tolerance in the way they do. Because the point, for instance, how can a Christian practice tolerance with regard to a Muslim? Does he have to understand something about Islam before you practice it? But the only way they can actually deal with the diversity would be to find ways of engaging each other. They don't really need to understand. They don't need too much of information to understand what the other one believes or not, but to be involved and engaged in activities that will expose the humanity in both groups and all that. What I think is, so that question, how do I practice tolerance today, is I think a question we keep asking. And how is it possible that we can gather all the practices and experiences in our classroom to help us either invigorate our understanding of tolerance, to promote it, or to redefine it and find some other meaning that can actually help humanity and promote the understanding going forward. As somebody mentioned, among the faculty, you may find out that you share the same office with another faculty, but because of your programs, you never really come to meet each other. You just can meet once a while at a department meeting. But I thought in the past, when members of the faculty would actually go for a drink, happy hour, do something that can bring them together and help them to discuss, questions outside academia anyway. So that's what I want once again to thank everybody.
Okay, I want to thank my co-facilitator, Manu, our hostess, Michiko, our 4 panelists, and I'm so convinced why your deans chose you, because you had such powerful messages for us. Manu, how do you want to say goodbye?
I want to thank all of you, especially all the panelists who shared the words of wisdom with us. And of course, my co-facilitator for all these years, Eileen, and Michiko for really coordinating everything, and also for the Center for Global Engagement, Dr. So, and we are happy to see Sheila as well. And I especially want to thank all those who attended. I know we have some students from different courses, some of them left already, and all the faculty and everyone. It was truly a good time, and I hope that it's beneficial to students, faculty, and all those who attended. Thank you so much, and have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. And
Thanks, everybody.
Let's demute our microphones so that we can say bye to everyone.
So long, everyone. So
Thank you.
nice to
Bye-bye.
see you.
Bye, Sheila.
Bye, everyone.
So long. Thank